welcome to the ever so slightly delayed audio narration for episode 25 of the Civ Battle Royale X Season 3, Acts and Revelations. Herein, death reaps its toll on the cylinder, several wars end decisively and otherwise, and some shocking turns lead to grand machinations playing out. I am once again your host, Doc Ito, coming to you from the freshly repaired and much improved scrapyard. Endless thanks to Iniokel for stepping in to take up the torch during my absence. With their indulgence to keep at it for another week, I'm hoping to fill in the 2 missing episodes this week and resume my regular schedule beginning with number 31, I think. Assuming no more plumbing explodes. Welcome one and all to the Civ Battle Royale X3. JDT 1706 here to pilot today's episode, so strap in, let's get a move on. Our first OC here is Neurosat's Web of Wars, a very handy tool for figuring out who's at war with whom. I distinctly remember Grag and Random Strategy, bless their hearts, doing this back in the previous marks, so having something like this appear again is welcomed. And here is our customary Varayan map. Truly a pillar of this game and community, and truly something we can't live without. Salute! Here's the list of supporters this week. Feel free to donate to the Ko-Fi to help keep the game running. Today we bear upon a big winner in last week's PR. The biggest winner, in fact. Greenland has grown by 7 through their successful invasion of Ireland. They're still rather vulnerable in their core, but hey, they ain't out. We begin our gander across the world map with a look at the Pandya. 2 episodes ago, we were optimistic that they might yank a city away from the Afghans. This episode, we're optimistic that they're gonna lose at least 1 city to the Afghans. And with the technological and numerical supremacy on the Afghan side, there may be more to come. We then mosey on over to the Tarim Basin, where the Han and Gokturks continue to duke it out. One of the most defining features of this war is the fact that the Gokturks are losing, despite their numerical superiority against the Han. In fact, currently you can count a few more Gokturk troops on the border, and they are about even tech. I guess the Han just know how to fight wars good.
Michael, what the fuck you doing, mate? Holy shite, you gold put in nice water. How are you losing this bad? You lost Tralee resoundingly and are failing to recapture an open goal. And now it's looking like you're going to lose Oviedo. Also, what's wrong with your tech? You look like a barbarian with those tech levels, damn it.
Whew, that's enough anger at Ireland out of my system. Anyway, we take a gander onto Egypt, where the titular Civ makes its last stand. Lost and abandoned in the city of Akhenaten for centuries, the Egyptians make endless offerings to the sun god Ra, and many divinations in hopes for victory against the invading Chadians. Such efforts buoyed by Pandyan war hero Vijaya Wimaralatne. The Chads, of course, do not care, because prayers to God won't do much against their much superior guns. In real life, Vijaya was possibly Sri Lanka's most distinguished field marshal. Now we take a look back to Indonesia, where Suharto adopts communism. Ironic. He became what he wished to destroy. Guess external pressure and those Turkish kickbacks were just a bit too scrumptious. In the meantime, his troops have surrounded Yogyakarta and seem poised to take it. We move on to South America as we get a look at the Kayapo-Rio de la Plata War. The Kayapo continue a slow and cautious advance, treating this war like just about everything they've been doing this game. Troop formations are dispersed and a bit sparse, but given the overwhelming technological superiority and the front line, I find it hard to not see Rio de la Plata losing more. Moving on to Central Asia, We witness the flip side of the Afghan intervention. The Permians have continued to make great progress in their southward thrust, having firmly secured Lashkar Gah. The Afghan army, au contraire to their fairly heavy force in India, is nowhere to be seen here, giving the Permians free reign over Central Asia. Could this presage the dawn of a new superpower? Also, the Malians enter the modern era, putting them on the same tech level as some of our other top-tier contenders. We mosey over to Australia, where the large Wiradjuri port of Maracoai is under assault by fearsome Timorese destroyers. While said force is a bit scattered and the Wiradjuri have the resources for a flip, a landing in this area would be devastating for the Wiradjuri and highly advantageous for the Timorese. Looking at the Black Sea, we see what Turkey has seen for the past several episodes. After 5 or 6 episodes of fruitless war against the Kievan Rus, the Turks finally seize Polotsk. For some information, Polotsk is the reason why there is no city in the Straits of Bosporus this game, as you can see by that one Kievan tile over there. Must be quite satisfying to at least own the tile that enables access between seas. In the Tsardom of Perm, change abounds. With the conquest of Vladimir and the glorious offensive of the south, the kingdom's prosperity has never been so high, but its people's wealth remains low. One Vladimir Lenin, former politician in Vladimir, holds a speech calling for change and peace, work and bread for all peoples of Perm. Azike takes these words to heart and declares Perm a Soviet Union of its peoples. In Australia, the Wiradjuri come to a crisis. The Timorese are moving in great masses through the north and west, and the people are uppity and scared. What do? Get them all together in a communal singing, of course, and try to get them to henceforth fight the Timorese. We unfortunately do not witness who's the third civ who got an ideology this turn. However, we do get to witness the Kilwan town of Sofala get pounded by a mighty Afghan force. It seems like the Afghans have invested a fairly significant naval force in this area, and the Kilwans have not divested a single military unit. This city is probably becoming Afghan soon, whether they like it or not. Jonas Savimbi erroneously declares war against the Zulu. Unfortunately, there's a little-known natural barrier called Botswana blocking his way into their lands, but it matters not. His elite shadow team of filibusterers and adventurers are lined up by the Cape of Good Hope and ready to move in for the kill. With the Zulu themselves fairly weakened, who knows how well this can go? The Malians take a page from the book of Mansa Musa as they seek to redistribute their immense wealth and become communist. The Malian Empire itself, though sparse and in some aspects backwards, is looking rather fine, especially for an African civ. With their rival the Normans growing stronger though, they should watch their six and get a move on. We move over to the Bering Strait as the Gokturks successfully reclaim the former Kwakwakuwaku city of Zawadi from the Cree. The two have been locked in a great duel over ownership of the former Ducklad lands, with the Cree being the instigators. Cree ships send Gokturk troops to watery graves, and the Gokturks toss the bodies of Cree prisoners into the frigid ocean. This one might just be a bout of permafrost, folks. And barely a turn after choosing an ideology, the Wiradjuri decide to break the chains of traditional ideological conventions and instead call for nationalistic pride in order to fend off the Timorese invasion. With how quickly civs are going for spirit, it really makes you think, why is this happening? Is spirit really that strong of an ideology? Or is the AI just kinda stupid? So, you guys know that one Civ 5 meme? The one where it just shows a guy steamrolling over their enemies with superior technology using clips from the anime Gate. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening here. The Turkish force in Ukraine consists of a single land ship, a single line infantry, a lone frigate, and 2 cavalry divisions. And yet, this has, thus far, been more than enough to deter the Rus army, which continues to use medieval tactics and equipment. Okay, Ahmad Shah, we get it. Have a big dick. You have a military big enough to project power as far down as Africa, with a force massive enough to blot out the sun in Sofala. Let's see if that force could allow you to not get penetrated up north, huh? We take a small glance at the Muisca with a particular focus on their great musician, experimental American-British producer and pop star Scott Walker. In real life, he was known for a series of eponymous albums that were noted for their great sonic variation and experimentation. As for the Muisca themselves, they're decent, they got a decent carpet. Their only real issue is that they practically only have one target to heave their weight at, and even then they have to time it to perfection. But who cares? Let's just listen to the music, baby. We move back around towards Zagreb, where the Yugoslavs have successfully stabilized the front with the coming of new troops from the newly adjourned Southern Front. Last time we looked, it was near inevitable that Brandenburg was going to capture it. Now, it's looking like a meat grinder. As anyone could easily have predicted beforehand, Ireland has lost Oviedo to Greenland. Great, Michael. Hope you're happy with your empire crumbling due to your incompetence. You bloody leaf-loving nitwit. The northern campaign of the Han continues with incredible force as they recapture Chenjian and make a concentrated effort towards Gold Sajin. Though they don't have many forces, the Han have grit, quality, and incredible tactics, and so we can only imagine how far they'll go, because they won't have truce with their northern furies. Not for a while longer, anyhow. With Yogyakarta recaptured, we finally achieved what I thought wouldn't happen in Indonesia, a congenitally owned Sumatra. Given the state of both combatants, it seemed like further progress on either end is unlikely, though we shall see in the future. We get to see the other clown in the Anglo-Irish War, the Anglo-Dutch. Currently, they seem to be languishing in the mainland and Britain, a little worse for wear, and definitely becoming the laughingstock of the PRs after throwing away Amsterdam to the Normans. But who knows? Maybe all they need for a comeback is to get rid of the worst city in the Netherlands. The Gokturk force around the Tarim Basin has started dissipating. The stress of a war on 2 fronts and the sheer concentration of Han forces have prevented them from being able to effectively retaliate on any. Nevertheless, they are desperate not to lose their core lands without a fight. Otuken has been reclaimed by a couple of cavalry divisions, and the flips continue. Moving back over to South Asia, we see that the Pandya are in dire straits as they lose Manar to a lone Afghan destroyer. They have a fleet of frigates off their coast, but it seems like they refuse to use them for one reason or another. On the bright side, both it and Thotukundi should flip back to them soon. Afghanistan is not exactly doing amazing right now. They just lost their gains in South India and are still losing to the Permians up north. But don't worry, boys. They got Sofala. It's over. They won now. Pack it up. The Brandenburgers, needing more bodies to pile onto the assault on Zagreb, decide to begin to integrate nationalist elements into their socialist form of governance. This union of black and scarlet brings on a new outlook towards their empire, though they are still being stalemated in Zagreb. Tutukundi flips back to the hands of the Pandya as the Afghan force slides back into the shadows. Looks like their conquests will have to wait a bit. Though, let's be real here, the Pandya are a joke, and can easily be broken by their neighbors at this point. The Gok Turks retake Chenchian, but the Han are retaliating with full firepower. Not only have they resecured Otuken, they have Chenchian surrounded, and Galzarun in the red. The fire and fury will rage on in the north for a while longer, it seems. The Timur-Wiradjuri War comes to an abrupt end, as the Wiradjuri end violence by giving up the city of Dumut. Though this is a victory for the Timurese, this may just be a better form of loss aversion to the Wiradjuri, who were in danger of losing their much larger cities up to the north and the east. Nevertheless, the best warriors are the ones who yield the least bloodshed, are they not? And Timur did make good gains. A small but sizable regiment of the Turks begins to make a march towards Kiev. The Rus warriors and guards attempt their best to beat them back, but spears and bolts merely deflect off their secret weapon of their 1st Landship Regiment, if they hadn't already been mowed down by rifles and muskets. All right, it's time for government analysis. We begin here with a series of military juntas, including the Cree and Chadians. We also witness the world's last merchant republic in Botswana, and the Grand Imperium of Mali, who seem to have usurped that title a bit from the Han. Moving down the government's list, we have the monarchies. Interestingly, from the list provided, only the Gokturks, Yemenis, and Permians are generally thought of as relevant powers. The way of kings does not belie well in this age and era, it seems. Here we find a few more monarchies. Of course, the star of the show is the Brandenburger Reich, whose ruler, Friedrich Wilhelm I, has been granted the epithet of Captain of the People, Commander-in-Chief of the Expeditionary Force against the Barbarians, by the will of the nation, King of Brandenburg. Really long title for a civ who has been a bit quiet until recently, isn't it? We also get to see the 4 monastic orders, with the Lithuanians' odd crusade being highly explained by their status as crusaders. A bit further down, we witness the principalities and nomad hordes of this world. The Mojave are a communist principality. Not that weird when you realize that many communist states retain monarchies in this world. The Afghans and Kokang also follow this government type. We also make note of several of the modern hordes. The Turks and Muisca have notably adopted this government type, alongside the previously witnessed Arapaho and Irish. I wonder what about nomadism makes it appealing in this world. We move down the list to witness the republics of the world with several notable alumni. We of course have the Socialist Republic of Indonesia, and the ever-so-spirited Republic of Timor-Leste, the plucky Greenlandic Republic, the good old USA, ruled by the fascists, and the Republic of the Sun, being the Inca. While not the most popular government type, most of the republics are doing quite well for themselves, I must say. Finally, we end this section by looking through the tribal confederacies and the Kievan Rus, who are so backwards they haven't even gotten basic systems of governance down and are still stuck with Stone Age tribal structures. The Kayapo have impressively stayed on a confederation of sorts for millennia, while the Anglo-Dutch have appeared to provide a more loose form of representation for their peoples. Alright, back to the action. It seems those Black Ops teams didn't do so hot, but were successful in gathering information about Zulu defenses, which is to say, they have no defenses. Emboldened, Savimbi begins plans for a more comprehensive attack on the Zulu, planning to simply move their units around the natural barrier of Botswana and make a direct headway into the Cape of Good Hope. We take a brief look at the Incan Pacific, where Incan scientists have successfully invented a unique machine to get closer to the sun. Of course, a quick intel search would reveal that the Mojave and Timorese have successfully created similar machines already, and that said machines can be highly effective for destroying the enemy from the skies. With the position of these newly minted babes on the Pacific, the Inca can potentially rain terror over the Maori or Wiradjuri. But, for now, they simply sit there, praising the sun. On the other side of the Incan Empire, Inca and Kayapo generals eye each other over hills. They scream daggers into each other's eyes and surround the quivering Argentine garrison with gunpowder and brimstone. The race for Machu is on. The Kayapo legions have the numerical advantage, but the Incans have some good units positioned nearby and the home court advantage. I wonder who's going to get the city at the end of this. A lone Afghan destroyer slips past the iconic sleeping Pandya fleet and snipes Manar. The city will flip back momentarily, but if a single troop of your opponents can stomp you, that probably isn't a good sign, especially if half your navy is just ghost ships. William III makes a concentrated attempt to put the England back in Anglo-Dutch as he mounts a concentrated offensive near Rotterdam. The Anglo-Dutch seem determined to turn things around this time, and the Irish look way worse for wear, with little in the way of resistance to this affair. We also see the Anglo-Dutch frigate UU, the man-of-war, which, if it were blockading Rotterdam, should put it into resistance, and which also increases the chance of defections from the Dutch UA, which make enemy units near cities of their religion have a chance to defect. The Irish, of course, have their homegrown Oriental Orthodoxy, meaning this UA is kind of moot. Nevertheless, could this lead to a Dutch dub? We hop on over to the Far East, where we witness another shot of the Beringian front. The Cree and Mori are working in tandem to counteract the fairly heavy Gokturk presence, throwing ships and men across the strait in an effort to push back the horde. The Gokturks, for their part, have met them with an equal if not superior force, with Sat Horopet and Zawadis becoming the primary hotspots. Buckle down, boys. This may be a long one. Meanwhile, with the capture of Gol Zarun, the Han declare the northern threat of the Gokturks neutered, and thus sue for peace. The Han were absolutely clinical in this war. Despite inferior troops, they managed to successfully take 4 cities, including the Gokturk capital. Sure, they are all fairly low pop thanks to the devastation of war, but that's a capital and 4 more cities right there. These can fairly quickly be turned around to become pretty handy resources. We take a small look at the domain of the Maori. Once a promising contender for Oceania, they proceeded to get ganked by the Wiradjuri before further digging their own grave by giving up Te Tokonganu in the peace deal. They may have had a chance against the Wiradjuri during the initial dogpile, but now they're here, languishing away in the Shire. Saida al-Hurra makes a bad jest about Norman cuisine and culture to the ambassador of Normandy at Salé. This greatly angers Robert Guiscard, who utilizes that as a pretext to attack the Tetuan. This may spell doom for Saida, though given the hard angle of attack into Marrakesh, they may yet survive. One of the many great strategic plans of the Han is to use the Ming as a buffer state against Kokang, preventing them from funneling troops straight into their lands during an overextended war. Well, the Han should probably rethink those plans, because the Kokang have cut through the whole Gordian knot of diplomacy and state sovereignty by citadeling a straight line through Fuzhou. Could this spell doom for the Chinese? We move forth to Mesopotamia to seek the relatively empty core of the Turks. Though their numbers are mostly belied at sea, their troops are fairly strong, thanks to the presence of land ships and occasional cavalrymen and infantrymen. Also, Yemen and Afghanistan are similarly barren, meaning right now Ataturk doesn't have much to worry about. Perhaps in the future, though, when he will inevitably come to blows, this region will wake once again. Wow, Uganda. Such kek. Such wow. Such strong. Truly epitome of potential. We take a little look at the USA, who are doing all right for themselves. They have a nice neck of the woods with a couple of prime opportunities for expansion and a very competent military. If they were to invade Greenland or the Arapaho right now, there'll probably be fairly little resistance to their advance. Instead, Führer D. Roosevelt opts to continue with his national reform programs, beaming pro-American propaganda into schools and cracking down on communist influences. In the midst of all this battling, we get to see a peace deal in the form of the Kokang making a truce with the Cambodians. The Cambodians seem to have mastered guerrilla warfare because despite using weaponry that belongs in the classical era, they successfully repelled the Kokang with ease. Nevertheless, this is one war Olive Yang is happy to get out of, even if it leaves him pouting. Unfortunately for the Inca, they will not be regaining Machu. A Kayapo regiment of newly retrofitted cavalrymen instead seize the city for their own nation. In the meantime, Raoni helps his troops push further down south, with a wave of cuirassiers, infantrymen, and Gatling guns pounding on the rocks of the Rio de la Plata. With Polotsk and Novgorod in their grasp, the Turks make peace with the Kievan Rus. The idea of a European state remaining practically at medieval levels of technology while all their neighbors are on early 20th century tech is fascinating. And on another note, Turkey finally gets the Bosporus. Could this lead to more violence later in a different direction? The Anglo-Dutch currently hold on to their reclaimed city of Rotterdam. However, the Irish have concentrated a force of newly minted line infantry and are seemingly surrounding the city, which is in the red. Though the Anglo-Dutch have the resources to very easily contest the city, including their shiny new frigate UU, the Irish are showing they won't let them have it without a fight. The Afghans make peace with the Bengalis, Zulu, and Kilwa, having already gotten their expected gains from the lattermost, and not willing to fight the hardened veterans of the Bengalis straight from the Indonesian War. With that out of the way, they are free to concentrate their forces into an assault on the Pandya, and those are a lot of troops against a really weak enemy. Get ready, because they're going to play hardball down south. No punches pulled. The curtains rise on the palace of Murshidabad as the people demand change. Change would abound as the Bengalis follow the communist ways. Unlike the distinctly anti-authoritarian brand of Indonesian socialism, the Bengalis remain tied to their discipline and reverence for their monarch. They are now rejuvenated and ready to strike back, and in fact, Yogyakarta is in the red down in the corner. And Egypt is dead. And they even go 50 slides without any mention. Classic. Egypt started off on the right foot with some strong settles across the Nile and Arabia. In fact, there was a brief time when they were the eye of the world's envy, shining like Horus through the sands of time. They helped decapitate Assyria and just had a good stat line and everything. Unfortunately for Akhenaten, he bore more resemblance to Icarus than Horus. The Egyptian conquests left them tired and overextended, something the Chadians and Turks capitalized on to great effect. Within a couple of episodes, Egypt had been reduced to just Akhenaten and Thebes, and then they proceeded to give Thebes away to the Turks, though in fairness, having that city wouldn't have changed much. Afterwards, they simply languished in their sarcophagus of Akhenaten, becoming the most boring civ in the game, an enigma known for being compared to eggs and drywall, until they uneventfully got conquered by the Chadians. What a shameful end for a once bright prospect. F. We hop on over back to Afghanistan, where the Afghans have opted to simply abandon the northern front in favor of hyper-focusing on the south, letting Sar-e-Pol fall to the hands of the Komi. Honestly, if they want to bet on the Permians petering out, now's the time. The expeditionary force looks exhausted and unreinforced. Better not get too complacent, though. I think that force is still capable of taking Kabul on a breezy day. Meanwhile, haunted by the fall of Sar-e-Pol, Afghan musician Bob Marley is inspired to write a folk song that will echo in the minds of Afghan children for generations, a song that will comfort them in times of dread. Don't worry, be happy. If the loss of Machu wasn't enough harm for the RDLP, they're about to get another bout of bad news. Kayapo troops are pouring over the city of Salta right now, and they have overwhelming military supremacy. San Martin should probably start thinking about expectation management and attempt to sue for peace ASAP. Korkai falls to the black. A miracle it's even hanging on at this point with no Pandian reinforcements and an Ulan right there to take it. Don't expect this to last, though. Every man in that city is a dead man walking. Zawadi falls back to the Gokturks, and Sat Poropet is now very firmly in their grasp. With the anime protag of the Han off their backs, Bumin Kagan decides to use this as an opportunity to flex his muscle, much like how a villain would beat on other, more powerful mates to assert dominance. Get ready, Motonari and Poundmaker. Saida is forced to retreat from her Algerian home to her new Catalonian home, as Saleh gets pounded by the Norman navy. Norman and Malian vacationers and bourgeois scramble to sell their comfy holiday assets as the Norman artillery pounds on the town. Saida, of course, is no exception, and she makes plans to use proceeds from the sale of her palace here to live comfortably in Marrakesh. The Wiradjuri decide to embark on a crusade against Yemen, seeking to free the holy city of Mecca, with its Aryan majority, from the evil clutches of the Muslims. All I will say is, where the hell was this army when Timor-Leste attacked? The Afghans continue to put all their eggs in the basket of the Indian campaign, moving a mighty army down south and capturing Korkai. It seems like the Afghans have whipped the army into shape, as this force seems more than ready to bash some Pandian heads, much like how Babur abandoned Kabul initially to conquer North India. Could Ahmad Shah Durrani be trying to steer his empire in a similar way? Over in Turkey, we go over to Ankara, where Ataturk unveils a giant statue of Jesus Christ overlooking the great city. The Cristo Redentor doesn't really do much in-game, but it looks cool, and it's funny that the Civ that founded Islam did it, until you remember that Jesus was the fourth, and to some Muslims, greatest prophet. The Bengali-Indonesian War ends, with the Bengalis successfully seizing Yogyakarta in the closing moments of the war. Great work, guys. You ruined my ideal borders. This war has been a net gain for Indonesia, but losing Yogyakarta in a self-declared war stings. What hurts even more is the fact they lost because their entire navy is just stuck in the Philippines, though the Bengalis did put up a good fight. And with that, Saleh falls to the Normans, leaving only Catalonia and the port of Marrakesh for the Tetuan. Luckily for them, the very awkward position of Meknes means that the Normans can only funnel troops through two one-tile-wide gaps. So until the Normans realize the Malians exist, Saida can max and relax in her one-tile empire. The USA, having remembered the great sins the Spaniards committed on Burgos all those years back, utilized that as a casus belli to invade. A fairly significant American naval force stands at the ready on the gates of Leon, but unless Isabella does another giveaway, progress may be slow. We move back towards the Bengali Empire. Though they may have lost most of their Indonesian holdings, they came out of the war in a better position than expected, since we thought they were going to get bodied going into it. Isambard Kingdom Brunel profits off the Great Peace, helping bolster heavy infrastructure efforts, and found several heavy industries in southwest Bengal. He also makes designs for a steel-hulled ship the Bengalis can use, though that may have to wait for another day. We take another gander at Ireland, where not only has the Irish army somehow gotten even smaller, but the Dutch are starting to coalesce a significant force around Rotterdam. Frankly, it is impressive how bad Michael is at war. You are doing what Solano Lopez was supposed to do last season, and folding even faster. Impeccable. We take another look at the Mojave domain, with a particular focus on the eccentric, waterbound performance of Screamin' Jay Hawkins. We explained most things about him in a previous episode, but this showman just won't stop showing off to the Mojave conscripts by Baja. He must have them transfixed, because the Mojave currently show no sign of aggression against other civs. Let's see if that changes soon. Tuthukundi falls back into Afghanistan's grasp, and they show no sign of letting up. Madurai and Manar are both still vulnerable, and the Afghan forces seem endless. Could this be a second elimination this episode? The Angolans are actually putting effort into a war. Unbelievable. They have a small armada of riflemen and frigates rocked up by Soroe, ready for the taking. And the Zulu are letting them have it? Wow. So I suppose the idea of Arapaho ever building a military is a meme. Just look at them. Even their minuscule army is revolting. This is almost certainly a consequence of natural low happiness from high pop, plus the fact they chose neutrality, an ideology that's not communism and which will therefore impart them with more discontent. Will we see a red tide in their area? Meanwhile, in Ljubljana, Joseph Tito finishes the construction of Mount Rushmore, a monument to the finest founders of Yugoslav socialist realism. I don't really know what it does in-game, but we can say all the comrades of Yugoslavia are proud to witness their forefathers etched into stone forever. And another wonder is built. This time the clocks chime 9 as Big Ben arrives to jive about in Dhaka. I can only imagine if Isambard helped speed this process along, but anyhow, Big Ben, yes, the monument of Bengali timekeeping and engineering. In-game it reduces gold purchases by a reasonable amount and provides increased gold influx, but since the AI never purchases with gold, it's kind of a useless wonder. Who cares though? Bing bong. The city of Mannar on Sri Lanka falls to Afghan hands. The fishermen rue as their boats are burned, the nobles scream as the end is nigh. The generals look about with a sigh. The end is coming. We move on to Madagascar, where the Zulus' last local holding of Flobane remains. It is in the black and would be certain to fall if it weren't for two inconvenient factors. First, Yemen can only approach on one angle. Second, they parked that one tile with a ranged unit. This might take a while, peeps. We take a look at the Pacific, where we get to admire the Mojave's massive but outdated fleet. In fact, dare I say, they are better as a naval power than a land power right now? Alongside that, we get small glimpses of the Mori and a good shot of the isolated Ming city of Guiyang and Kokang outpost of Chan Ti Ai, where we can see that the Kokang have learned how to fly. We take a brief look into the lands of the Permians, where a fair portion of the Lithuanian army resides. With these folk being devout to the Patriarch of Vladimir, they have joined with Permian forces to civilize those barbaric heathens in Afghanistan. Would they be better off defending Lithuania? Yes. Is it not funny? Yes, it is funny. Wait. The absolute madman. Muskets, carracks, line infantry, and frigates pound the city of Soroy with little reinforcement possible. Damn. What looked to be a useless war might just grant dividends for Savimbi after all. It's a 2-in-1. Kudir Malai has fallen to the Afghans, and Madurai is completely in the black. Death approaches Ali Rani, her civilization doomed to fade into legend, much like in real life. He did it. Unbelievable. Angola actually took a city in a war. What a momentous occasion for Jonas Savimbi. The first win in his long path to victory has begun, and now he may continue pushing against the Zulu, though his troops in the area are probably too weak. Nevertheless, we can finally say it. Death to the MPLA! We take a glance at the southernmost points of the Earth, where a joint Timorese-Yemeni task force have been pounding on the isolated city of Ndandakuska. The locals are barely concerned about the gunfire, instead worried over their rations and the frigid winters. We also see the very empty Zulu corps, and that, as predicted, Hlobane isn't falling yet. Flub your start, come back, have a good war with Egypt, proceed to do nothing. Have your nation start to crumble due to overpopulation. Kill Egypt, proceed to continue doing nothing. Chad.png. The Kayapo appear to have built a very reasonable army, mixed in resources between GWIs, riflemen, and a few ceremonial line infantrymen. They have also decided to switch targets towards Catamarca, readying up a bevy of GWIs to take over the city promptly. The Argentines ready a response force, but they are 500 years too late to properly oppose the Kayapol. The Kokang decide to try and get their comeuppance on Indonesia by attacking them not long after the Bengali War. Remember, the last time the two duked it out, Indonesia won overwhelmingly but refused to take land and instead got game ruined by demanding all of Kokang's luxuries and then proceeding to suffer 12 turns of anarchy. This time, though, the Kokang seem distinctly more ready and even have the technological advantage. Let's see how they duel. The Anglo-Dutch march a strong force into Rotterdam, a great line of blue guards, line infantry, cavalry, and even some more advanced artillery pieces. The blue guards can attack twice in a single turn, and are strengthened when adjacent to units from civs with the same religion. They probably aren't getting any buffs right now, but with how things are going, we could see the Dutch singing Rule Britannia sooner rather than later. Here it comes, the inevitable, the duel of the fates. Timor-Leste joins the Indo-Kokang War on the side of the Kokang. If you told me 7 months ago that the Timor-Leste are going to hold a decisive advantage in a war against Indonesia, I would have laughed my ass off into tomorrow. But here we are. The Timorese have a very decisive edge over Indonesia, with a military 2 eras ahead of the Indonesians, partially due to the fact that Indonesia got game ruined by 12 turns of anarchy from Kokang, and partially because most of their relevant troops are gone after that war with Bengal. Hold on to your hats, lads. This ain't gonna be pretty. And with the capture of Madurai, the Pandya are gone, most likely for good, because those frigates over there can't recapture cities. The Pandya went off to a pretty decent start, though it was fairly uneventful, but they quickly got pegged back down to a rump with losses to Bengal and Afghanistan. They then sorta just sat there, being the best of the worst, and getting memed by Kilwa that one time, until the war with Afghanistan. We initially expected that they could, maybe, snipe a city from Afghanistan, but no. Instead, they did the exact opposite, and just died. Truly a performance of all time. F. After a coronation as King of England in Rotterdam, William III witnesses the sad state of the Dutch army. They are being too passive against the non-confrontational Irish. They need to unite the spirit of the people in order to truly defeat their enemy at home court. With that spirit in hand, the Anglo-Dutch become communist and attempt to send more units over the Channel to reinforce assaults up north, while the specter of Amsterdam remains, a reminder of a humiliating blunder that will never fade away. Well, it looks like the tide has turned on the Mori, as the Gokturks begin putting a token force on Honshu. Any chance for objective victory for the Mori has seemingly passed. All that's left now is hoping they can battle off the Turks for long enough. Barely a turn passes, and the Timorese have already secured Makassar from the Indonesians, with Palembang also open for assault. Up in the north, the vast Indonesian army present attempts to push through Battambang and Maliana, though their technological inferiority may cause progress to be minimal. Needless to say, there's a clear winner right now, and it's not Suharto, as we all originally thought. We end this episode with another distinctly less expected Timor-Leste game. The Zulu city of Ndondakuska, near the frigid wastes of Antarctica. The contingent that seized this city is a small but hardened group of destroyers and frigates, not high in number, but potentially good enough to be a thorn in the Zulu side, since they are 2 eras behind the Timorese. And even if that doesn't happen, that's a forward operating base for future incursions into Africa. Anyhow, that's all, folks. This is JDT 1706, and tune in next week for another episode of the Civ Battle Royale. Unless you're listening to this, in which case, keep your earballs open for Part 26 to drop in a few days. Also, keep your fingers crossed, your powder dry, your friends close, your enemies closer, your nose to the grindstone, and out of other people's business. Good night.